Hello, this is Gavin Simon, Research Analyst for Supply Chain Management at ARC Advisory Group. Joining me today for Logistic Viewpoints Executive Spotlight Series is Mike Hane, Director of Industry Strategy for TMS at Descartes. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Gavin. Great to see you. Glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So let's get started here. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into supply chain, and give us some background on your journey with Descartes?
Sure, yeah. So I started in supply chain working on transportation projects, fleet routing and scheduling way back in the 90s doing that, and then worked for some different software companies and consulting companies, spent a lot of time doing transportation-based projects like fleet sizing, mode optimization, even strategic network design projects and things like that. And I kind of transitioned from consulting into more the go-to-market, like how to get the message out, how to, what do people really need in the marketplace. And yeah, so I've been with Descartes now for about a year and a half, and in a go-to-market role here as well. Focused on our, like you said, our TMS solutions, which includes our visibility, our transportation management solutions, as well as our connectivity and collaboration stuff. So, Descartes been around since I believe 1981. It was founded, so it's been around a long time. Canadian-based global operations. We're actually traded on the Toronto and the NASDAQ stock exchanges, and we work with shippers and logistics service providers. Basically anyone with a really transportation or logistics intensive business to help them manage the movement of data, information, and goods around the world globally. So within that we have, fleet routing and scheduling, TM, which is what I do. We have global trade intelligence, customs compliance. We have an e-commerce pillar that's mainly focused on shipping and fulfillment. International broker forwarder enterprise systems, and all that is supported by our global collaborative multimodal logistics community called the GLN, the Global Logistics Network. So there's a lot of great stuff going on here, and looking forward to talking to you more about the TM side of things today.
Yeah, that was exceptional. Thank you so much. So Descartes recently released its 8th annual Global Transportation Management Benchmark Survey. I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper to the results a little bit, but before we do, can you just give me a little bit of background on the survey process and the respondents?
Yeah, great. So this is our 8th year doing the report, and this year we did something a little different. We actually hired an outside research firm, Sapio Research, to help us actually execute and manage gathering of the data. So it's an online survey form. We focus on North America, so mainly US and Canada, as well as Western Europe for the respondents. And with Sapio, we were able to narrow down and kind of cull out the respondents that we wanted. So we looked at folks that were manager level or higher, folks that were related or worked in transportation or had some function that made transportation decisions at those organizations, and folks that were actually shipping goods and things like that. So this year was 630 respondents, so it was more than double of what we had done in previous years. And because of that size, we actually were able to actually narrow down into some, separate out the data a little more versus just like one big, this is what everyone's thinking. We could get, and I can get into that a little bit more when we get into the details between some of the things we found. So it was about 2/3, I think, shipper this time, and 1/3 LSP, broker, forwarder, 3PL. So a lot of shippers in this survey, and it was split 50-50 between US and Europe. So that was one thing we worked with Sapio to make sure we had, it wasn't just dominated by one set over the other. Like I said, it's about 20 questions, or almost 30 this year, I guess. We try to keep it simple. We don't want people to bail out halfway through. So it is an online survey, and there is some vetting questions in there just to make sure it's someone who actually, knows what transportation is. They're not just clicking buttons. But yeah, so the main thing we're looking for is just what are the trends in the market? How are people thinking about transportation management, investment in technologies and strategies? And, just what capabilities and strategies and tactics, that they're interested in or that they're concerned with, honestly. So that's how we kind of did the survey.
Off topic, but is this survey, are the questions just used, is the data used internally? Is this just to inform like your view on the market, like looking forward, or how is the data actually like applied and used?
Yeah, so we publish the report, so we can send out a link to everyone. So we do publish, so we use it internally to help kind of validate our own business strategies of where we're looking for. I mean, the questions we're asking, we're not like getting down into the main reasons why people say what they say. So there is some interpretation that needs to be done with that, but we definitely do look at and we can get into some of the things like we saw this year, like fleet management popped up where it hadn't before. So okay, that might be something we want to make sure we're focusing on. That, and not just the other things that have been. Look at the trends over time, and this is a popular report out with folks that follow us as well, just to see hey, these are the things I'm concerned with. What are other folks doing as well? And the other thing that, because of the data we're collecting, we're able to, and I'll just get into one of my answers for a future thing, but I think it makes sense here, is that we are separating out the respondents into, do they consider transportation a competitive weapon, or something as, I don't want to say necessary evil, or just not as important, right? And then we can look at and focus on those answers between folks that consider transportation a competitive weapon and what do they say versus the not important. And then we also ask the respondents to classify, how is their company doing financially? And so best in class, or we break that into our categories, our top performer, and then we have poorer performers. And so you can see hey, well, if I want my company to be a top performer, or we think we use transportation as a competitive weapon, how do we align with other folks, who also are doing that, and what do they consider? So again, it's not just the one answer of this is the most important, but what do people who, are really looking at for transportation and using it innovatively, what are they looking at? So that's another thing about the survey when we get into the details of the results.
Oh, that's interesting. As we both know, the TMS market has been steadily growing. By all accounts, will continue to do so. What industry or regulatory challenges will have the biggest impact on the market over the next 5 years?
Right. So this is a question we've asked every year of the survey. And a lot of the questions we do ask over and over because we want to see the trends and what comes in and out. So fuel cost was the top response this year. And it was the top response last year as well. The thing that's interesting this year, besides fuel costs, was that environmental regulations came in at number 2 overall. And, just overall carrier costs, carrier charges. So those were new this year into the top 3 of concerns. So last year we saw driver shortage, and carrier capacity were in the top 3. So they were still high in the list, but they dropped out of those top 3. And then this is where this year I was excited to have so many more respondents, because if we actually look at that by North American shipper versus European shipper, and not just the one answer, driver shortage was actually number 2 in the concern for North American shippers behind fuel. And that was not a top concern for Europeans, for European shippers. So it's interesting. So that was something we couldn't do before. But environmental regulations were still number 3 for North American shippers. So
was it number 2 for the EU?
It was still, it was number 1 for the EU. Sorry. It was behind, fuel was number 1, environmental regulations was 1, and fuel was 2. I believe I'm saying that right. And then carrier charges were still in the top 3. It was still in the top 3 there.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are going into that. It's interesting also to me about fuel, that it's been high for a while, but I guess it's still just, with some of the uncertainty that's still out there, maybe folks are still, it's been high and it's remained high, but with some of the conflicts going on and everything else. I think it's just kind of a looming thing that people are always concerned about. It could throw another wrench into a lot of stuff. So,
from a technology standpoint, what are some of the biggest trends that you are seeing within the TMS market, and some of the trends maybe that stood out to you in the survey?
Yep. So again, this a question we've been asking over and over. What's interesting this year, so still, even with the inflationary conditions we're seeing, consumer spending is still high and all that stuff, but cost of everything is going up. 3/4 of the respondents are still increasing the amount of their IT investment over the next 2 years. What we did also note was that, so we let them choose are you increasing it by over 5%, 1 to 5%, right? So the people increasing it by over 5%, that proportion dropped actually this year. Okay. So while overall spending still is meant to increase on the highest level, people that were maybe said 5%, over 5% last year are now just 1 to 5% this year. But the other thing we saw was that the top performers, they were like 2.5 times more likely to be increasing their spending by more than 5% over people that were poorer performers who classified themselves that way. So top performers, competitive weapon, right, are more likely to invest in technologies, and specifically we're asking about TM, technology, which is a whole host of things in that. But so that's what was one of the main interesting points, is that investment is still going up. The other thing around technology that we saw this year and strategies was that a lot of people consider themselves fast followers versus early adopters, right? So it's not, not everyone this year, and that the numbers moved a little bit, but so they're not necessarily, the majority of folks who responded, they're not like on the leading edge of like going and looking for that very next thing, but it's more like, oh, someone's using this and they seem to be working, I'll try that too, right? So that's kind of the fast follower versus an early adopter would be like on the leading edge. So it's another interesting way to look at it. And again, folks on the competitive weapon side are much more likely to be an early adopter. So looking for innovative ways to provide more value for their customers, by embracing newer strategies and newer technologies. The other thing that I think is important here is that while, cost control is always important around transportation management technology, right? Business growth was selected as the main for those competitive weapon respondents as to why they are investing in TM technology. So they're looking for TM technology, optimization, management, visibility, connectivity, all that stuff, to grow their business, not just control costs. And so there was a few different questions on that around offering different delivery options and things like that of trying to get more innovative that way. Those are the main things.
You touched upon visibility, so let's segue into that a bit. How important is visibility in the overall transportation management picture?
This has been, so when we ask this question, we ask it a few different ways. Like what capability does your organization need to manage transportation effectively? What capability delivers the greatest value to your organization now and looking forward? And where are you going to make your greatest amount of investment in IT capabilities? Visibility is number one in all those the way you word those questions. It's number one, and it's been number one for every year we've done this study. So it's very important, right? And there's plenty of reasons for that, but the pandemic really showed some of the limitations in some of the systems and operations out there. But that's just, it's been a snowball effect. It's just it continues on, and especially with all the different type of issues we've seen coming up, whether it's the Red Sea and Panama and labor conflict or whatever it might be, right? The visibility data feeds everything else that happens in the supply chain. And so that was one thing we also saw from the competitive weapon and top performers. They share that transportation data more widely internally and externally. So with warehouse and operations, with the receiving, right, with production, with customer service, with their suppliers and carriers, versus the folks that view transportation as not important. They're not sharing that data as much, right? So you can optimize labor in the warehouse. You're capable to promise, extending your inventory footprint to, cans that are out on the ocean, right? And getting a full picture. So that is definitely growing, and people want to take more advantage of that and leveraging that data with, other tools and that they have, to help them manage and optimize that.
Can I ask one more additional question on visibility? What data sources provide visibility? What are you accounting for?
Yeah, so there are so it's made up of a lot of your own supply chain ecosystem partners networks, right?
Okay.
But there's so Descartes, we have a tool called MacroPoint, right, where we actually tie into truckers, ELDs, their TMS systems. So we connect into steamship lines and things like that. And there's other tools out there that do that as well. But yeah, so for specifically transportation visibility, you're able to in real time know where is this load or shipment? What is its status? What's its temperature? With using AI and other stuff, do I think it's going to be late? Should I raise an alert to that? So there's lots. So you get, part of it is just connecting with your partners via API, and a lot of people with EDI, right? So there's that data, a lot of that information still comes in. But then there's this newer version of family of tools that, came out about 8-10 years ago, that you can really get into this real-time visibility in transit of where it actually is, like breadcrumbs trail on a map and all that stuff. So, but yeah, good question.
So as we both know, sustainability is a topic that is front and center for global supply chains, and companies have incorporated sustainability goals into their supply chain operations over the last few years. This comes in a variety of forms, including responsible product packaging, energy efficiency, alternative fuels, and route optimization, just to name a few. What are the key trends you are seeing in sustainability, and what is Descartes doing to make a difference?
Yep. Yeah, so as we mentioned already, so environmental regulations was a top concern, or something that was going to have the greatest impact over the next 5 years. So it's definitely everyone's thinking about it. I'll focus on what Descartes is doing first, and then I'll get into some of the other thoughts of more broadly. So specifically within Descartes, I mentioned all those different solution areas that we have. Like everyone knows, within TM, right, when you're optimizing, you're typically reducing miles, right, which reduces greenhouse gas. So we have a lot of solutions on the routing and scheduling side, on the transportation management, consolidation, mode switching, all that stuff. So just by reducing miles and consolidating, you're going to save money, but you're also going to reduce emissions. The other thing that we have been doing a little more recently is some of our solutions, we actually have customer-facing parts of things where if you give your end customer different delivery options, you can offer them a more eco-friendly delivery option, right? It doesn't have to be like, maybe I don't need it next day, but hey, if you do it, this day in this window, right, we'll save, and you can show them, right, like, hey, you'll be, helping the earth, and some people maybe even say, hey, we'll give you a couple dollars off the delivery if you choose that. So that's something else we can do in our solutions as well, is let the end consumer choose for themselves. So within that, we do track. I think we've helped save last year something like 250 million gallons of fuel with our customers last year. The other thing that we're doing in our solutions is we're digitizing and automating a lot of paper processes. So, customs filings, shipment manifests, warehouse pick sheets, invoices, proof of deliveries, right? So this, again, was something else that the pandemic kind of spurred on because of the whole no-touch kind of stuff, but it keeps going from that. We tracked last year, it was over, I think, 2.4 billion sheets of paper we helped to eliminate from just helping people automate and digitize, those, just very, what used to be, faxes and all that sort of stuff, and sheets of paper that need to get transferred. So, and within our solutions, we help people, track and report on their greenhouse gas emissions to make sure, they're in compliance in, whatever region they work in, right? So, there's the reporting requirements we all know about. And so that's something, our customers can do within our solutions as well. And then just to shift gears a little bit, definitely we did see a little bit of a difference between the North American shippers and the European shippers, which I expected, where, the reporting on it was, a lot of folks were doing it, but it's definitely, you see it's more broad in Europe for sure. So a lot of folks are taking it into account. We also asked if they take it into account in their strategic decision making and their daily decisions. So a lot of folks say they are doing that. And even the ones that maybe don't actually report on it say they do that, or don't report on it as much. They still say that they're taking it into account.
Reporting on emissions?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So to be in compliance with the new regulations. And so over time, those regulations, right, are going to get more, there's the different levels of reporting that you're aware of. Yeah. So level 1 to level 3. Yeah. So it'll go up. I think people, it just, some folks aren't going to do it until they're forced. Right. But again, as we saw, like the competitive weapon and the top performer, or it's something you can use as a differentiation with your end user, end customer. So it is growing in importance for sure.
Right. And I've been recently working on a report on ESG, and I think there's also value chain peer pressure. Sometimes companies are you're going to be expected to have your emissions reports and information about your emissions. And if you don't, because you don't have to, because you're not under these regulations just yet, but sometimes maybe these supply chain partners are going to say, you know what, maybe I don't want to work with this organization because they don't have their emissions reports, and I need those to create my emissions reports. So let's make our job easier here.
No, that's a good point, because as the company kind of edicts come down, like we saw this years ago. I worked in doing a lot of transportation bids, but like, I don't know if you've heard, like when SmartWay first came around. So this was like where carriers can get certified as SmartWay, that they are more fuel efficient, right? They reduce idling. And so we actually saw folks that say, I need I'm going to be 80% SmartWay carriers, right? And I mean, now it's kind of like I was talking about years, but that was just an example of like how you can put pressure. Like if a carrier, someone's going to start to lose business because of this, then it kind of forces them to do it. So yeah, there's lots of ways companies can put pressure on their partners to do this, with giving them more business, right? So.
Well, Mike, those are all the questions I had for you today. Is there anything that I missed on, or if you wanted to bring up any additional points?
No, that's the main thing. It's just, visibility still continues to be a huge, capability that people are looking for. And that the other thing I would just say about this is what we saw with the competitive weapon folks is that, it's not just cost control. They're looking to grow the business. They're looking for other ways to offer innovative solutions for their customers. And, that we also saw that the way people measure the transportation management value of those systems is not always just through cost control, but through contribution to revenue and things like that. So one of the things I always tell people, if you have to make business decisions based on limitations of your back-end systems, you may want to take a look at those back-end systems. Like someone says, hey, I got this, let's co-ship with someone, let's put in a backhaul here and all this stuff. And someone said, well, I can't get the TMS. We can't load our rates that way. Okay, well then that's not a great sign that it'd be awesome if every system, you're not limited into how innovative you can be by your back end systems. Right. I guess that would be one of the main takeaways as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Logistic Viewpoints Executive Spotlight Series. Once again, this is Mike Hane, Director of Industry Strategy for TMS at Descartes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gavin. Great to join you.